We go now to Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What happened? This country was supposed to be at a moment of reckoning at the relationship between police and the Black community. Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment. I have been at this table twice already. They've walked away twice. They did this a year ago, and they're doing it again now.
You're blaming Democrats for the failure of police reform.
I can't understand. Well, we should ask ourselves, how did we get here at all? It's the big blue cities where they have failed to pass policies that protect their most vulnerable communities. Think about Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Cleveland, Portland, Seattle. This problem came to the federal government because of the failure of blue mayors and liberal city council members for us to get here. So what we've decided to do was to stay at the table and look for common ground. We found common ground. We found common ground on military equipment. We found common ground on chokeholds. We found common ground on providing PTSD assistance and mental health and co-responders. We found common ground on a number of areas. Instead of moving forward on the areas where we were in agreement, they just simply walked away.
But you just detailed all those points of agreement.
Yes.
Senator Cory Booker, who was your partner in this.
Yes.
I mean, this started under the Trump administration, it continued under the Biden administration.
Exactly.
When Republicans in control went nowhere, Democrats in control, it's going nowhere.
But both times, the folks that left the table were the Democrats. Let's just be clear that we have stayed at the table. The Justice Act provided clear direction to improve the quality of the experience for the communities at risk and the law enforcement officers who patrol those areas.
So if you're still at the table, was the issue that you just couldn't deliver Republican votes?
Absolutely not.
What Senator
Absolutely
Booker proposed to you with what he has described as this compromise?
Once again, the fact is that last time around, we gave them 20 amendments to change the bill in any way they wanted to. This time, we said simply this: I am not going to participate in reducing funding for the police after we saw major city after major city defund the police. Many provisions in this bill that he wanted me to agree to limited or reduced funding for the police. That's a lose. That's a lose-lose proposition. When you reduce funding for police, you actually lose lives in the communities. Our approach was a win-win approach. We want the best wearing the badge, and we want the vulnerable protected. So when you tie funding losses in this legislation, you should expect an allergic reaction from me.
But they would say, and Senator Booker's team has said publicly in interviews he's done, that there wasn't a net loss of funding. In fact, there was funding being increased in terms of increased mental health funding specifically, that there were specific programs for recruitment and training funding increases, body-worn camera funding increases, data collection.
Yes,
so that's not cutting funding. It's might be allocating it in different ways.
Actually, here's what we know. We have about $1 billion in grant money that goes to police. When you start saying in order to receive those dollars, you must do A, B, and C, and if you don't do A, B, and C, you literally lose eligibility for the two major pots of money, the burn grants and the COP grants. When you tell local law enforcement agencies that you are ineligible for money, that's defunding the police. There's no way to spin that. You can spin it by saying—
But this would codify the Trump executive orders.
Let me finish. The Trump executive order, I actually agreed to. What I did not agree to was the cuts that come from non-compliance. When you say, once again, that in order for you to receive the money for the burn grants or the COP grants, you must do the following. And if you don't do the following, you lose money. That's more defunding the police. We saw that tried throughout the country. You wouldn't want to cut funding for underperformance, is what you're saying? Not at all. I would say
you would want to increase to police departments that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Let's look at what we're asking for. What the Democrats asked for was a simple thing. They asked for more reporting on serious bodily injury to death. I said that's a great idea. When they wanted to nationalize local policing, I said that's a bad idea. When they say that every single traffic stop in this country must be reported to the federal government, whether it's a traffic ticket or stopping someone on the streets of New York or Charleston, every single time that you have any interaction, for the federal government to be in charge of all that information, I say let's do it, but let's do it voluntarily. Let's not punish local law enforcement by not having complied to that one
The Fraternal
incident.
Order of Police endorsed this.
Well, the Fraternal Order of Police did not endorse the bill in its current form.
Well, Senator Booker says that they have come out in support of it.
You're just going to read the emails and tell who's where on that one. That's a simple one to solve.
You repeatedly have said, because look, I mean, people at home watching this say this was a moment that was missed. And because of that, this just looks like it's playing politics again.
I mean, think they're playing politics. You're right.
But what about Republicans here? Because I know
We're
you're saying you're at the table.
No,
you're at the table, but when you're coming back to defunding the police, which is a very effective political line.
No, it's actually parts of their legislation. Now, Margaret, if we're going to be fair to the American people to get the whole story,
let me just finish
you
my
have to allow me to have a conversation about the issue that I've been working on for the last 2 years. So I'm going to give you the answer to the defunding the police.
But isn't this just Republicans not wanting to look like they are being soft on crime ahead of the 2020 races?
Of course not. That's the answer to the question. No.
Was that part of your calculation at all?
Not at all. Why would I be at a table? I'm the person who has lived in the communities that we're talking about. I'm the person who has experienced the challenges that we are trying to solve. I'm the person who understands and appreciates this issue intimately. I'm not having an academic conversation about something I know very little about.
So
you said, let me finish. I understand this issue better than most people. And I will tell you this, that if you want to keep our communities safe, you have to properly fund the police. If you say to the police, I'm going to reduce your funding if you don't allow us to nationalize this conversation and nationalize local police, you lose funding. That is something I won't agree to. Local police should be local issues. We can do a better job by providing more resources, not by taking away resources.
So I just want to make sure to button this up.
Certainly.
The issue that for you sunk all of this had to do with funding related to data collection about traffic stops at the national level?
Absolutely. You asked me for specificity. I gave you an example. There were eight or nine issues, 8 or 9 parts of the bill where the answer the Democrats put on the table was reducing the funding to the police. When you have one issue, we can work that out. When you have 8 different areas of the legislation that reduces funding, that's a different conversation. Now you're talking about defunding the police. You may not like that as a statement, but it's actually what you can read in the language of the bill.
Okay, we'll leave it there, but Senator Booker has said on MSNBC—
Well, all you have to do is actually read the areas of the bill that actually reduce the funding.
Okay.
That's available.
So obviously that's a big point of disagreement between the two of you and the interpretation.
Only if you can't read.
Are you saying Senator Booker can't read?
I'm only saying that if you read the legislation, it's pretty simple. This is not something that I'm making up and we can debate our facts. We can actually say in several different areas of the bill, it reduces funding.
I want to ask you about other happenings or lack of happenings on Capitol Hill.
Okay.
The White House has said it is preparing for a partial government shutdown, just planning at this point, as soon as October 1st if Congress doesn't act. You and your fellow Senate Republicans are expected to block this attempt by Democrats to both fund the government and increase the debt ceiling, which allows the Treasury to essentially continue to borrow money. Why risk this? Why play politics with something that could so damage the U.S. economy?
I think you ask a very fair question. I ask myself the same question. Why are the Democrats playing politics with spending?
But you are going to vote to block this.
When you look at the fact that we said to them in July that if they're going to spend $1.9 trillion early this year, followed by $1.2 trillion on infrastructure, followed by $3.5 trillion of spending on reconciliation, followed by a $4 trillion budget, or said differently, $10.5 trillion of spending. If you're going to spend that level of money, historically high levels, then you have to be responsible for the debt ceiling being raised. They have the time to get it done. They have the votes to get it done. They should get it done.
But you're going to vote down this attempt.
I am not going to be complicit to their reckless, irresponsible spending.
But to be fair, some of this spending also happened on the Republicans' watch when—
Not this $10.5 trillion.
Not the new spending.
There were
We're
90,
talking about past spending.
Of course, 90.
So if both sides spent it,
let me
should
finish
both sides be responsible for it?
90 Republicans and Democrats agreed to 5 CARES packages in 2020. Very responsible. This time, in a partisan exercise, only Democrats are spending up to $10.5 trillion irresponsibly, recklessly.
So this is really about the president's key agenda items in the $3.5 trillion spending bill. That's what this is, leverage?
Absolutely not. This is $1.9 trillion that they spent on COVID relief earlier this year, with 1% going to vaccine. This is a $1.2 trillion to spend on infrastructure, creating about $300 billion of additional debt. On top of that, you had another $3.5 trillion that changes America permanently if they get the content of that bill, which would have more resources going to families not connected to work. On top of that, $4 trillion of additional spending. When you spend $10.5 trillion in a partisan-only exercise, you should be responsible for what you're doing to the American people and not for the American people.
Is the government going to shut down, and are we really going to have this argument yet again on something that for the American people just looks like Congress can't agree to pay for things it's already doing? I mean, it looks
we're not actually
straight
paying
up
for
political.
things that we're already doing. They're actually introducing new programs that they want the American people to digest and then pay for with extraordinarily high taxes. So this is not about what we've done in the past. This is about what they want to do in the future.
I want to also ask you about immigration. You didn't seem to have a problem when President Trump adopted these pandemic-era regulations, Title 42, which allows for those migrants crossing the border to be expelled without first being guaranteed asylum hearings. This was all justified under the pandemic. The Biden administration kept those things in place. Do you have a problem with what the Biden administration is doing with the expulsion of migrants now?
I was for a strong border under President Trump. I'm for a strong border right now under President Biden.
So you, when it comes to this question of the Haitian migrants, that the White House has basically said it's embarrassed about what has happened in the past week and a half. Do you think that it's justified, and what you have seen on camera with some of these thousands of Haitian migrants being forcibly expelled, some of them rounded up by men on horseback, is what you're seeing humane?
I think President Biden and his administration owns the crisis that they've created at the border, the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding before every eye in the American public.
But it's the same policies under the Trump administration.
The treatment obviously is different. That's why his people have resigned from their post. It's the responsibility of the president.
For Haiti, you're talking about there.
Thank you. It is the responsibility of the president to secure our borders. President Biden has not done so. The crisis of his own making looks very similar to the one that he made in Afghanistan, the one we're experiencing right now with taxing, the one we're experiencing with spending. So yes, this president should do a much better job of avoiding crises that are avoidable.
Just to button that up, though, the president has said those people, he's talking about the men on horseback who at times it looked like they were whipping some of these Haitian migrants who were running. He said, I promise you, those people will pay, those agents. Should those agents pay? Did what those agents do look wrong to you?
I certainly think he should hold accountable his agency, absolutely.
So it looked wrong to you?
I think he should hold the folks accountable. There's no question that what we're trying to do, I hope, is to come to an actual fact-driven conversation about what happened in that situation. And I hope that whomever needs to be held responsible is held responsible. The ultimate person responsible for the crisis at the border is President Joe Biden.
Senator Scott, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation, so stay with us.